Why Media Group? The fastest growing media group in North America.
But when it comes to what is happening with Canada in terms of shifting its immigration numbers, Canada's been for a long time a place where people around the world want to come and live in Canada, including myself and my family. And many people I know listening and watching have migrated to Canada. Now, Canada is moving to tighten its asylum system on top of what we're seeing happen in this geopolitical situation of mass evacuations, millions of people being displaced. Canada is moving to tighten its asylum system. The federal government has essentially introduced stricter rules to limit who can access refugee hearings and speed up removals. They have now announced a new one-year rule for asylum claims. These are claimants who've been in Canada for over 1 year, may be denied a full hearing before the Immigration and Refugee Board. Now, these asylum seekers entering via the United States, we share one of the biggest borders with the United States, must file within 14 days or lose access to a full hearing. So what does this mean? There's now two paths for asylum seekers, one being a full refugee hearing, which essentially means you'll have your full case review in front of a tribunal. You can present evidence, testimony, legal arguments, and there it's about 60% acceptance rate. But now there's an alternative process, which is a pre-removal risk assessment called the PRRA. Essentially, it's done faster, it's paper-based, and it's a limited review. You will not have a full hearing, less ability to argue your case. And when it comes to the acceptance numbers, it's about 30%. So what does this mean? It means it's much harder to win on this alternative route. If someone is pushed into an alternative process instead of a full hearing, it means their chances of staying in Canada are cut roughly in half. Now, these rules are for people who may be denied full hearing, and these cases, as we've seen, their success path is only 30% instead of the 60%, which means more rejections and faster deportation. Now, why is this taking place? Well, essentially, the government of Canada is saying that the system is under heavy strain. Refugee Backlog estimates at about 280,000 cases, and immigration levels as a response have been cut. So what does that mean? We saw the numbers in 2025 at 395,000. That has been dropped for 2026 at 380,000 and 365,000 for 2027. So that means that temporary residential residents are also dropping sharply. Why is this taking place? Well, Canada has decided to shift its expansion model it's had in terms of being a country that attracts foreign, investors as well as immigration. This is to be able to control and enforce what they're saying is a tightly asylum access while cutting down on the overall immigration and revealing pressure on what has been heard when it comes to housing and services. Now, yesterday, Mark Carney, who has now his majority government in Ottawa, had a visit from the Prime Minister of Finland. And Mark Carney met with Prime Minister Alexander Stubb in Ottawa as a part of high-level visits focused on strengthening Canada and Finland ties. Why is this important? Well, you all remember about President Trump's whole way about Greenland in terms of acquiring Greenland as a strategic route. Now, this has exceeded the conversations between Canada and their European Union allies, as well as Canada reaching its 2% mark for defense spending for NATO, the 2% of GDP, which is a requirement to be a NATO ally. Now, a NATO member ally. Now, the meeting centered on defense, Arctic security, advanced technology cooperations, reflecting a growing alignment between what we're seeing in the two countries. These are two NATO allies. The key outcomes included new government, new agreements on maritime security, AI, quantum tech, and critical minerals, along with plans to deepen intelligence sharing and defense collaboration between the two countries. Essentially, the two countries are deemed to be like-minded in terms of their middle power. If you recall the big speech by Prime Minister Carney in Davos about middle power, this is what we're seeing, a shift between Finland and Canada for middle power. Now, Prime Minister Stubb did float, saying that Canada is, should be part of the EU orbit, essentially, and obviously not critically, but, in terms of why did he say that? Essentially signifying that Canada is very already European aligned. We've seen this Prime Minister spend a lot of time in the European Union, making sure that his alliances with the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and key countries are on the same page when it comes to responding into this war with Russia and Ukraine. And we've seen that happen with this escalation war that's taken place between United States, Israel, and Iran. Pretty much Canada and the European Union nations have stayed on the same way, as well as those NATO member countries as well. So essentially saying that Canada shares values on democracy, rule of law, and multilateralism, essentially saying that there's strong security ties via NATO, as well as deep economic links when it comes to Europe, when it comes to trade and investment. Of course, we can't forget that Prime Minister Mark Carney was the governor of Bank of England after he was the governor of Bank of Canada. So there are those strong ties there. And they have been coordinated on some of those regional issues like the conflicts we just spoke about, as well as Arctic security. Now, Canada is pivoting away. Of course, we're still mindful of our American trade partner, but we're seeing Canada as pivoting more towards Europe to be able to have those trade agreements in place, and really create a buffer to what's to come when it comes to CUSMA agreements that are to take place this year. Of course, that is a trade agreement between Canada, United States, and Mexico. And we want to see this Prime Minister do well with this trade agreement because Canada does rely on our American trading partners. Now, when it comes to affordability, which we started talking about today, well, this is happening as a time where major producers are saying that they're going to introduce the extra fees tied to fuel costs and pass it down the supply chain, which essentially in plain language means that they're going to take the high prices that they're seeing when it comes to gas, and they're going to add that on to the final price for the consumers when they purchase their goods at the grocery stores and at stores. Essentially, they're saying that this surcharge is a variable, not fixed, so it's not a percentage, but they're saying that the fees are designed to rise and fall with fuel prices, meaning grocery costs could fluctuate more frequently and not in standard to inflation. Up to now, we've measured the cost of grocery items such as, milk and meat and vegetables and all those items according to inflation numbers. Now it's moving away, not to inflation numbers, but to the cost of oil, to the cost of gas prices, which we've of course heard this government give us of relief till September, till Labor Day, but there's still increases, right? Even with the gas tax being removed, there's still increases in the price of gas and oil because of the conflict that we've seen play out. Now, why is that the case? Well, fuel is a core input when it comes to food distribution, right? You see higher oil prices directly impact and increase trucking and delivery costs across Canada. So whether it's your food that's being delivered to the grocery store, or whether it's the Amazon packages that are being ordered, it is all adding up. Now, Prime Minister Mark Carney did make that announcement, but we're going to see what it means for a relief that is less temporary, but more permanent, which the Conservatives are calling for. The Conservatives are the official opposition party, and they've been calling for more permanent measures to relieve Canadians. And when it comes to food prices, they're already up 5 to 6% year over year. This data is showing that grocery inflation is elevated, and even overall inflation is cooling. So that's why it's not linked to inflation anymore, which it should be. Now, food prices are up about 20% over the last 3 years. This is long-term pressures. That means households are having a harder time in terms of stretching their budgets to meet what is happening at the gas station, as well as the goods that they need to consume. Now, experts are warning that this is more volatile because it is going to be based on prices. So 1 week you might see the cost of a certain item at the grocery store, such as milk and eggs and butter, be high, and the next week be low. And so that is the environment we're living in. And now that is confirmed by new numbers from Costco, right? They're showing that there's a shift to value-driven spending. So Costco is saying its customers are still spending. So if you've ever driven by a Costco parking lot, you see it's absolutely full. But what I've noticed when I drive by a Costco parking lot is that the people who are, coming out of Costco with their carts, there's less items in their carts. And I've seen some people just carry a few bags out of Costco, not full carts like we used to see before. So what is Costco saying? They're saying that essentially the traffic is still up, but people are prioritizing value and essential items over discretionary items. So the traffic being up, but spending is more selective. They're saying they're seeing that when they say the traffic is up, that's about 3.1% globally, and shoppers are more cautious on each purchase. They're seeing that middle class pressures are showing, which is a shift from tight household budgets, right? So when you have a budget of what you're shopping for, that's constrained because now the dollar in terms of the value that it has, but also we're seeing this increases in pricing. And so consumers are trading down and focusing on bulk and value buys, which Costco is known for. And that's why you're seeing this shift in terms of the numbers escalating. Now, the strong sales are despite the economic strains. There are seeing steady growth, but when it comes to low price positioning for what it means in terms of bulk buying. Costco's numbers, they're saying that their sales, they're seeing international, it's comparable. Their sales are up about 12%, but in Canada, they are up about 10.7%. So the broader trend is what it is. Value retail is winning, buying bulk, choosing low cost items, and cutting back on non-essentials. And when it comes to AI, we haven't talked about AI in some time. We know that since ChatGPT came on, the minds of people, and as a product a couple of years ago, it's fast changed the AI game as AI has been integrated in our way of living, how we use it, and how businesses are using it. And we know the announcements that have taken place in terms of having AI data centers to be able to fuel the AI increase, and what it means for super intelligence AI, which is what these companies, AI companies, are really fast tracking to be the company that comes up with super intelligence. But what does it mean when it comes to the workforce? We've heard all kinds of numbers, but when it comes to Canada, there's an article that's written that I want to highlight today. It was written by Kevin Page and Dejima Ramos. Kevin Page is the president of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy at the University of Ottawa, and he was also a former parliamentary budget officer and a contributing writer for the Policy magazine. And in that, he highlights that AI has contributed to roughly $20 billion annually over the last 5 years, showing major economic upside, and also saying that at the same time as showing major economic upside while AI is being used for efficiency and everything else, it also means that 47% of jobs are at risk of this disruption, and essentially saying that nearly half of Canadian workers could see their jobs impacted by AI in the near term. 56% of workers in an AI-exposed role is becoming a trend, which means more than half of jobs are already in roles where AI is either assisting or replacing the tasks. And AI exposure is strongest in higher paying jobs. Full-time jobs, meaning disruptions, will not be what would be impacted in terms of low wage work. This could also impact high wage. We've seen that happen when it comes to Tata, when it comes to companies that have people who actually assess and value, who are hired to get on job sites to be able to provide a report on assessment. We've seen that happen when it comes to those fields, because AI is able to take a large amount of data in a very short period of time and provide analysis. So we know that those markets have already been hit severely, and those were high-paying jobs. Now, Canada is lagging on the AI adoption in terms that, it's seen that it's only 12% of firms have taken on AI, which is showing a major gap between what could be the potential of AI as well as the execution in terms of reality. There is a skills gap, and as a major barrier to this, employers are struggling to find workers with AI skills while workers lack training and have, mismatch slowing this adoption rate. So now there is currently no policy that we're hearing for in terms of labor protection, training systems, and what that means in terms of AI really outpacing human productivity and what the disruptions are caused. So this is something that I look forward to hearing from this majority government that Prime Minister Mark Carney now has in terms of what it means, because by the time he goes to election in 2028, AI would have already shifted many, many different things because we're seeing this fast emergence. Now, Canada faces this paradox of this huge AI economic upside, but massive workforce disruption risks, which the system is just not ready yet. It's not just Canada, it's the United States, and it's the world global economy, to be exact. Now, according to Stats Canada, the government of Canada, Stats Canada released a report on January 28th, 2026, this year, saying that there are structural shifts in the job market, and Canada is moving from labor shortage to labor rebalancing. What does that mean? It sounds like a lot of marketing terms. What that means is that employers are becoming more selective when it comes to hiring, as workers need new and upgraded skills, which is part of what this report was talking about. And essentially, the broader Stats Canada findings are showing that 60% of workers are now exposed to AI changes. Many jobs are being modified and maybe not replaced. But what that means is that work is becoming a lot more competitive, that it's not just the jobs that are existing. It means that Canadians need to be more competitive, skill-driven job market, which means there are fewer easy entry points, as well as skills mattering more than ever. AI is quietly reshaping roles, not just eliminating them, but when it means quietly, it means suddenly. Now, when it comes to young Canadians, what does that mean? Right now, the latest numbers are that young Canadians face 14% unemployment, right? The youth job market is tougher than ever, is what they're reporting. Young Canadians are facing one of the most difficult hiring environments in years, especially for entry-level roles. If you recall, it used to be easy to get into entry-level roles. Okay, maybe not easy, but used to be doable. And now the jobless rate of young people is roughly double the national average, highlighting a major gap. So now, what were these entry-level jobs? They're almost disappearing, according to young Canadians, essentially saying that there's fewer openings in key youth sectors, such as retail. So when you go to a mall, you would see, the cashiers and the people working in those stores are traditionally youth. If you went into, a fast food joint, you would see youth, hospitality, administration. Those were usually the first job entry pathways. That's how when I was a youth, those were the jobs I went into. I went easily into retail. I went easily into administration. But the job markets have changed now. When it comes to training programs, entry roles are now oversubscribed. They're saying that there's more applicants per jobs. Example, there's about 1,100 applicants for just 20 spots, is what is showing in data. And that means that's intense competition. And this is at the same time as slow growth, high interest rates, weaker business confidence, and reducing, hiring demands. This also impacts part-time jobs, job losses, and pressures. Canada recently just saw 69,700 part-time job losses, which is disproportionately affects young Canadians, young workers. And some of them are saying that there's a skill mismatch problem. Essentially, many graduates, many educated Canadians are facing underemployment, meaning that they have skills that are highly above what the job that they're seeking for. So that's part of what we're seeing take place. And many graduates, as they're facing underemployment, they're working below their qualifications. And that's because they may be highly educated, they may have degrees, but they have lack of relevant experience, right? These entry-level jobs essentially trained young Canadians to know how to show up to workplace, show up on time, be responsible, follow, rules, orders, be able to deliver. And those are trainings that you do not get in high school or university or college. It's a different level of training that you get on-job training. So you have graduates that are, graduating in their mid-20s, late 20s, if they've now gone for their master's, with very little exposure in the workplace. And that also means very little contacts in the workplace that really affects hiring. So that's what's happening when it comes to young Canadians, but more when it comes to Ontario, there are some changes that are taking place. Now it's been announced by the minister in Ontario government that there will be mandatory exams returning for grade 9 to grade 12. And this is for high school. Ontario will require written exams in full high school courses, reversing years of more flexible assessments, which we saw take place. Now, the newest thing is that attendance is now part of the final grades. What does that mean? That means now that teachers were saying that essentially they're having students skip classes. So now part of your marks will come to attendance. So showing up will be part of your attendance. So if you're in grade 9 and 10, your attendance will cover 15% of your grade. That's pretty huge. Not a couple of percent. I mean, I recall when I was in high school, attendance was just mandatory, right? And if you didn't attend, you would fall behind and you would care because that means you wouldn't do well on the tests and examinations. But here, now, if you're in grade 9 and 10, essentially 15% of that is based on you showing up for your final grades. When it comes to grade 11 and 12, it is 10% of their attendance and participation will be part of their final grades. Now, this is a shift towards accountability model, is what we're hearing from our Ontario government. Essentially, government saying that it aims to provide improved student performance and discipline, tying efforts more directly to grades. And this is also during a time where we're seeing less teacher discretion because standardized exams and grading rules will reduce flexibility in how teachers assess their students. This standardization should clear a clear value of where students are in terms of their literacy rate and what they were, where Canada's performing. Of course, everything is interdependent, right? You have a good literacy rate, you have, decent numbers when it comes to these standardized tests. It affects the job market. It affects all the other things that we've been talking about when it comes to also AI, part-time job, full-time jobs. Everything's interdependent, and these are key things that we need to keep track of. It's a lot that's been going on here. Of course, this is the Y Media Newsroom. I'm Ramona Singh. Until tomorrow, stay well.
Y Media Group, the fastest growing media group in North America.